Hi, I'm Jeff Bartels, Infrastructure Technical Specialist at Autodesk, and today we're going to be starting a new series called Civil 3D Template Tips, Tricks, and Shortcuts. In this session, we'll be exploring several time-saving shortcuts associated with template and style creation. The content that we look at is going to be organized into two major categories: template settings and style creation. Throughout the session, I'll be using a rapid-fire approach to the material so we can get through as many concepts as possible. This recording represents template settings, tips, and shortcuts, and it's part one of the overall session. As you can see, I've just launched Civil 3D 2016. Let's assume I'd like to create a Civil 3D template for my company or for a customer. Normally, when I create a template, I like to start from a completely empty blank file. To do that, I'll come up to the application menu and I'll come down and choose New. And then rather than selecting a template, I'm going to open this menu next to the Open button, and I'll choose Open with No Template Imperial. This gives me a completely blank slate to work from. If I open the Layer panel, we can see that it only includes one layer. I actually have just the bare minimum for this drawing to even exist. If I go to the Settings tab on the tool space, just for a second, we'll open the point category. Let's open point styles. You can see I have one style here called Standard, label styles, one called Standard. Basically, I have one style for everything. I can then edit that style or create additional styles to match my CAD standards. Let's close this back up. The next thing I like to do is adjust my annotative scales. If I open this menu, you can see since we're starting from a generic drawing, we have a lot of architectural scales in here. I'd like to use engineering scales. Let me show you a quick way to load those. I'll go back to the Settings tab. Let's drag this to the top. I'll right-click on the drawing name and I'll choose Edit Drawing Settings. Here on the Units and Zone tab, I'm going to open this menu in the middle and I'll choose US Survey Foot. That represents the unit of measure I'd like to use. Then I'll come over and open the scale list. Here are my engineering scales. I'm going to start by selecting 1 = 10 feet, and then I'll come down and click Apply. When I do, you can see that was assigned to the drawing. It's also been loaded to the annotative scale list. From here, I can open the menu and I can continue to load more of these. There are other ways to create scales. This is a really quick way. Let me grab a couple more. I'll choose 1 inch = 60 feet. And then we'll choose 1 inch = 100 feet. I'll click OK. Let's open the list. You can see those now exist. I'm going to roll the mouse wheel down. To get to the bottom of the list, I'll choose Custom. From here, I can delete the styles I no longer need. I'll start by selecting 1 to 1. Let's drag the slider to the bottom. I'll hold my Shift key and select the last scale, and then I'll choose Delete. And then I'll click OK. If I open the annotative scale list, you can see I've got a nice start for my scales. As a side note, let me click Custom one more time. If you needed to create additional scales, we can always do that right here. Next, I'll ask myself if I have any existing content that I can leverage. Maybe I'm migrating to Civil 3D from another CAD package, like MicroStation or maybe Land Desktop. Maybe I have a DWG file that contains content like layers or line types or blocks. Rather than reinventing the wheel and creating those items again, I can bring them into this file. I'm going to press Ctrl+2 to bring up the Design Center. Over here on the left side of the screen, it's just like Windows Explorer. I can navigate my hard drive. Let me navigate into this folder called Exercise Files, and then I'll click the plus to expand this drawing called Customer File. Notice all the categories representing the content that I can steal. I'm going to select Layers. Here's all the layers that are in that drawing. I'm going to drag them all into this file. Let me select the first one. I'll drag this to the bottom and I'll hold my Shift key and select the last one. I will then click, hold, and drag and drop these into model space. Now I apologize for my screen size. It's a little tight here. Let me drop those right there. Note that if you wanted to, you could also right click on these and choose Add Layers. Let's bring in a little more content. I'll go to Text Styles and let's bring in this Autodesk one. Let's bring in this one called Roman S. Maybe we'll go to Dimension Styles. I'll drag across these. We'll bring these into the drawing. At this point, I can continue to shop for content until I bring in everything I need. When I'm finished, I'll close the Design Center. Next, I'll assign the default properties I'd like to use for my label styles. I'll do that here on the Settings tab. Let me right-click on the file name, and I'll choose Edit Label Style Defaults. These settings represent the starting point for every label style in Civil 3D. To open a category, I can click the plus, or I can come down and use these buttons to expand or contract all of the categories. We'll look at a couple of these. Right here, Text Style. This is where I can assign the default style for every label. I'll click in the field and then I'll click the ellipsis button. Let's select the Romanesque style I dragged in, and I'll click OK. Under Plan Readability, right here we have Readability Bias, 110 degrees. That controls the readability of our text as it's rotated. Based on the current setting, it'll actually go upside down a little bit before it flips over. So I'm going to click in here and I'll assign a default rotation of 90 degrees, and I'll press Enter. Coming down a little further, we have text height. Maybe my typical text height is 0.125. I'll assign that here. Note that there is also a text height associated with the drag state. I'll set that to 0.125. Basically, by assigning my properties here, I don't have to assign it on every style. These become the starting point for every style. Let's drag this back up. Note there are some child overrides here. For right now, I'm going to turn these off. We'll talk about child overrides in just a little bit. Let's remove those, and I'll click OK. We'll then check. Let me right-click on the drawing, and I'll choose Edit Label Style Defaults. Let's expand these, and I can see all those overrides have been removed. I'll click OK. The next thing I'd like to do is select some object layers. I'll right-click on the file name and go back to Edit Drawing Settings. From here, I'll choose the Object Layers tab, and here we can see a list of every object Civil 3D can create, and the default layer that that object will be placed on. Right now, they're all the same. Let's adjust the alignments. I'm going to click in the Layer property. From here, I can select a layer from my drawing. If I had more than one drawing open, I could change the source and actually pull layers from another file. Let me drag down, and we'll say that every alignment I create is going to be placed on this layer called Z-Align. I'll click OK. Let's test it. Let's click OK, and I'll come up and launch the alignment command, Alignment Creation Tools. We can see right here that the alignment that I create will be placed on this layer. Now, maybe I'd like even more control, because the way this is set up now, every alignment I create is placed on one layer. Maybe I'd like each alignment to be on their own unique layer. Let's look at how we can do that. I'll close this up. Let's right-click. We'll go back to Edit Drawing Settings. What I'm going to do is add a modifier. Let's click in the modifier column, and I'll choose Suffix. And then for the value, I'll type ***. What I'm saying here is when I create this Civil 3D object, it's going to be placed on this layer, and that layer is going to have a suffix of the object's name. Fortunately, we don't have to remember to use the asterisk. We can see it written right down here. Let's test this new setting. I'll click OK. I'll go up and we'll create an alignment. We can see the difference. Let me name this alignment. I'll call this Main Street, and you can see how that's going to be placed on a unique layer. Note that when I create an alignment, I can choose the object style. What does the geometry look like? I can also choose the label style. What are the labels going to look like? Since I'm in a relatively empty drawing, I don't have many options here. So I'll tell you what, let's close this file. I won't save changes. And let's create a new drawing. Let me choose New. I'll create a new drawing from the default Civil 3D Imperial template. Now that I'm in the new drawing, let's go up and we'll choose Alignment Creation Tools. And you can see there are some styles already selected. If I open the object style list, you can see there's a few object styles in here. Same with the label styles. You may be wondering if it's possible to preload these options. And we can do that. Let's close this. On the Settings tab, I'm going to right-click on the Alignment category. From here, I'll choose Edit Feature Settings. I will then open Default Styles. Let's expand this dialog box a little. Right here, we can see the object style is proposed. Let's make a change. I'm going to set this to Layout for right now. And then the alignment label set, let's change this as well. Let's change this to Major and Minor only. Note that we have some child overrides. We'll take care of those in just a second. For right now, I'm going to clear these. Let me click OK. So we have our object style and our label style. Let's go up and create another alignment. Alignment Creation Tools. Right here, you can see we're using the Layout, Object Style, and Major and Minor label set. Let's close this. So by assigning the properties here at the feature level, I'm saying that every alignment I create, no matter how I create it, is going to have that object style and that label style by default. I can always change it, but those are the default settings. Maybe I'd like even more control. Let me drag this tool space open a little wider. Let's expand alignment. Inside the alignment category is a commands group. Let me expand this. In here, we have every command associated with alignments. Here I can set default styles and settings on a command-by-command basis. For example, if I want to create an alignment from objects, I will right-click on this command, Create Alignment Entities, Edit Command Settings. Let's go to Default Styles, and we can see Layout and Major and Minor Only. That's what every alignment is getting by default. But when I create one from Objects, I would like it to have an object style of Existing, and I would like it to have a label set of, we'll say no labels. That'll be easy to remember. Note that as I make these adjustments, it's coming up as an override. That's because I'm overriding the properties assigned to the feature class. Keep that in mind. Let me click OK. Now let's draw a polyline here on screen. We'll make an alignment out of this. Alignment, create alignment from objects. I'll select this polyline. I'll hit my spacebar a couple times, and you can see when I create one by objects, it's getting the existing style and no labels. Let me click OK. Yet, if I just go to create an alignment using the layout tools, that method is still using the feature defaults. Let me close this. Now that I've made adjustments to this individual command, let me drag up. Let's right-click on the feature, and we'll choose Edit Feature Settings. We'll go to Default Styles. Notice the two child overrides. This tells us that the feature, by default, is getting this object and label style, but somebody at a lower level has overridden those values. If I click, unfortunately, it won't tell us where that's overridden, but if I wanted to clear it, I could click these boxes and then click OK. Now that I've made that adjustment, we can go back down to Create Alignment Entities, Edit Command Settings, Default Styles, and you can see how that's back to the feature settings. What you want to do with Civil 3D is create styles that represent your CAD standards and then assign those as the defaults for your commands. Let me close this. I'm going to create another polyline quickly. And let's go to Alignment, and I'll say Create Alignment from Objects. I will then select my polyline. I'll press the spacebar a couple times. So we've seen how we can preload a layer and styles. You may be wondering if it's possible to preload some of these other settings. Actually, the workflow is the same. Let me close this. I'm going to right-click on the Create Alignment from Entities command, and I'll choose Edit Command Settings. See these options right here that look like little dialog boxes? If I expand these, we can see some of the properties associated with that command. Add curves between tangents. You know what? Let's set that to false. Alignment type option. By default, that's going to be centerline. Maybe I would like that to be miscellaneous. After making those changes, let me click OK. Let's go to Alignment. Create Alignment from Objects. I'll select this one. Press Enter. And you can see my Add Curves Between Tangents setting has been removed, and we are creating this as a miscellaneous alignment. Let's close this. Let's take the concept a little further. I'm going to close this drawing. I won't save changes. Let's open another file. Let me click Open, and we'll open this drawing called Corridor. This drawing was created using the Civil 3D default Imperial template. As you can see, I have a corridor on screen here. Let me select this, and I'm going to bring up the section editor. By default, we can see the configuration of views. Now, this isn't bad, but maybe I'd like it to be a little bit different. I'm going to come over here to the right, and I'll choose Edit the Viewport Configuration Options. Maybe I'd like the section view to be on top. I would like the profile here in the number 2 viewport, and I would like the plan view in the number 3 viewport. Let me click OK. That looks good. Another thing I'd like to do, as I zoom in and out here on the section view, I really don't care for the adaptive grid. So let me open up this dialog box, and from here I can choose the adaptive grid. Let's turn that off. I could also adjust the colors of the grid. We'll make them black, maybe. We'll set that for the major and minor grid color. And then maybe the text color, we'll make that yellow. I'll click OK. There we go. As I zoom in and out, we can see the grid, the size of the squares doesn't change. So this is nice. I adjusted these settings in this drawing, but these settings are only saved in this drawing. How can I set these properties in my template? Let's do this. I'm going to close the section editor, and I'm going to create a new drawing from scratch. This will be from the Civil 3D template. When the drawing comes up, let's go to the Modify tab, and then I'll come down and click the Corridor button. Then I'll open the section editor menu. Right here, I can assign my viewport configuration. We could do this the same as we did before. Let's open this up again. Here's where I go to View Edit Options, and I can adjust the properties of the section editor. These settings will then be retained and displayed in every future drawing. Let's close this. I'll return to my corridor file. Let's talk for a second about object naming. I'm going to go to the Home tab, and let's create an alignment here. I'm just going to create a polyline quickly. We'll put an arc in here. And I'd like to turn this into an alignment. Let me open the alignment menu and I'll choose Create Alignment from Objects. We'll choose this one. By default, this is called alignment dash and then the next counter. How can we control that? Let me close this. On the Settings tab, I'm going to come down to Alignment. I'm going to do this at the command level. I'll say Create Alignment from Entities. Let's right-click, Edit Command Settings. From here, I'll choose Default Name Format. Right here, Alignment Name Template. Let me click in this dialog box and I'll click the ellipsis button. Maybe I would like to just use ALG dash and then I can drop in the next counter. Or if I want to, I could delete, we could open up property fields. Okay, I guess next counter is the only one that we have. Basically, the workflow for these alignments is going to be the same workflow that you would use for any object. You'll find that on occasion we have different property fields. Let me accept that one. I'll click OK. Let's make the alignment again. Alignment, create alignment from objects. This one. ALG and then the next number, if I wanted to go with that. Since we put that in there, we'll keep it. Let's go ahead and click OK. Now let's create a surface profile. I'll select my alignment and then I'll come up and choose surface profile. So ALG1, I'm going to be sampling the existing ground surface. When I click Add, you can see the name that it's going to give that profile. And unfortunately, I can't change that name here. Let's save a step in this case as well. Let me close this. Here on the Settings tab, I will go to Profile. Let's go to Commands. I'll find Create Profile from Surface. Let me right-click, Edit Command Settings. Default Name Format. Profile Name Template. Let me click in this field. I'll click the ellipsis button. I would like to use, all this is selected right now. Let me just click Insert. I'd like to start it with the alignment name, dash, and then I'd like it followed with the sampled surface name. Using these name templates, we can ensure that all of our Civil 3D objects utilize consistent naming. I'm going to click OK, then I'll click OK. Let's create the surface profile again. I'll select this and I'll go to Surface Profile. Let me click Add. We can see right there it's going to be called ALG-1-EG. I'll choose Draw in Profile View, Create Profile View, and I'll place this. Let me pan this over. Here I have my assembly that I used for my corridor. If I hover over these subassembly parts, you can see they've got the original names. Okay, Urban Curb Gutter General, very long. In most cases, when we're working on our corridor, especially if we're doing targets, let me select this and I go to Corridor Properties. If we're assigning targets, sometimes having those big names isn't the most descriptive thing in the world. So then we end up coming back and we select the assembly. We go to Assembly Properties and then under Construction here, we can give these unique names. Let's look at how we can save some time. I'm going to close this dialog box. Let me hit Escape a couple times. I'm going to create a new assembly. We'll just call this Sample, and I'll place that here. Now, before I add some new parts, wouldn't it be nice if each time I dropped a part in here, it asked me what I wanted to name it? To do that, I'm going to go to the Settings tab, and then I'll come over to Subassembly, Commands. I'll right-click on this one, Create Subassembly Tool. Edit Command Settings. Let's open Subassembly Options. Subassembly Name Prompt. That's turned off. Let me turn that on. I'll click OK. Now let's add some new parts. I'll click the assembly and I'll go up and choose Tool Palette to open that up. Let's go to the Lanes tab and I'll choose Lane Super Elevation AOR. Let's check now. Let me go to the Properties palette. Looks like I'm dropping this on the right side. So let me click the assembly. We'll call this Lane Right. Let's drop another one. We'll call this one Lane Left. By turning the automatic naming on in your template, once again, you can ensure that these objects are named at the point of entry. Let's look at another helpful tool. I'm going to close this palette. Let's open another drawing. I'm going to open this one called Sample Data. In this file, I have multiple surfaces. I have multiple alignments. Let me hover over this surface. It's called EG1, and it's got the style contours 2 and 10 background. This one's called EG2, same style. This one's called EG3, same style. On the Settings tab, I'm going to open the Surface category. I'll go to Surface Styles, and we'll expand this. Right here we can see the styles that are in use. We can tell that by the small triangle. Let's look at how we can find where these are used. I'm going to right-click on Contours 2 and 10 background, and I'll choose Find References. When I do, Civil 3D will show me every place this surface is utilized. It's applied to 3 tin surfaces, and it's associated with a drawing setting. Which one? We can find it by right-clicking, and I'll choose Browse To. It'll take me right to that area in the Settings tab. From here, let's right-click. I'll go to Edit Feature Settings, Default Styles, and it's right there. Let's change this. I'll click the ellipsis button. We'll change this to 1 and 5 Design. I'll click OK, and I'll click OK. Let's close this. I'll go back to the Surface Styles. We'll right-click and we'll choose Find References. You can see it's only on those 3 surfaces now. Maybe I'd like to change the style associated with those surfaces. I'll right-click on the style and I'll choose Replace With. This will replace the style no matter where it's at, if it's on an object or if it's applied to a setting. Let's swap this out with Elevation Banding 2D. I'll click OK. We can close this. You can see how that style's been applied to those surfaces, and you can see the contours 2 foot and 10 foot is no longer in use. This can be a nice tool when you're trying to delete styles that are hard to remove. It can also be nice if you receive files from others. You can use this to apply your styles to their objects. Let's look at one more helpful tool. I'm going to open this drawing called Facet Dev. In this file, I have a corridor. If I zoom in, we can see the corridor has a top surface. There's also a pipe network in here. Let's pan this over and we'll look at the profile. In the profile, we can see the pipe network. If I zoom in on the end view of some of these pipes, they kind of look like polygons. It is possible to smooth their appearance. There's a system variable called Facet Dev. Let me press enter. By default, that's assigned a value of 0.5. The lower you make the number, the smoother the arcs are going to appear. That being said, there is a trade-off with drawing performance. For this example, I'm going to set it to 0.05. And I'll press enter, and we can see the difference. It's important to note that the Facet Dev system variable is associated with Civil 3D, not AutoCAD, and it is saved in the local drawing. If you found this content helpful, please rate it by clicking the thumbs up icon. This will help other AKN users identify valuable content. On behalf of Autodesk, this is Jeff Bartels saying thank you for watching.